In the heart of the verdant kingdom of Eldoria, where rivers ran as clear as polished glass and the forests whispered secrets on the wind, reigned King Alaric. He was a just and beloved ruler, his hair the color of autumn wheat touched by the first frost of winter, and his eyes held the deep, thoughtful gray of a dawn sky. Eldoria was a realm of profound peace and quiet prosperity. Its people were masters of their craftsweavers whose tapestries seemed to hold living light, masons whose castles seemed to grow from the very stone of the mountains, and farmers whose fields yielded harvests of impossible bounty. The kingdom was cradled in a gentle, ambient magic, a soft hum in the earth and a shimmer in the air that was as natural as birdsong. Yet, for all the peace in his realm, King Alaric carried a quiet restlessness in his heart. It was a longing that bloomed most fully in the deep of night. While his kingdom slept under a blanket of stars, Alaric would climb the winding stone steps to the highest turret of his castle, the Solarium Tower. It was not a place of war or watchfulness, but an observatory, built by his mother, the late Queen Lyra. Its domed ceiling was a marvel of enchanted glass. So clear it was as if there were nothing between him and the endless, velvet expanse above. Here, surrounded by the scent of old parchment, beeswax candles, and the cool, clean fragrance of the night air, Alaric would gaze upon his heart's truest desire, the moon. To the people of Eldoria, it was a beautiful lamp in the sky, a marker of seasons, a patron of lovers and dreamers. But to Alaric it was a world, a destination, promise. His mother, Queen Lyra, had not been a conventional queen. They called her the Stargazer. She had spent more time with celestial charts than with royal decrees, her fingers more often stained with the ink of star maps than adorned with rings. She had filled Alaric's childhood with tales not of dragons and knights, but of cosmic seas and silver shores. She called the moon Selene's lantern, a beacon of pure magic hanging in the ether, the celestial ocean that flowed between the worlds. "One day, my little starling," she would whisper, her voice as soft as moth's wings, "mankind will not just look upon the lantern, but will walk in its gentle light. They will find that it is not a cold, dead rock, but a place of quiet wonder, where dreams are as real as stones." Years had passed since she had been taken by a sudden fever, leaving a void in the kingdom and a deeper one in Alaric's heart. He had ruled well, dutifully, his love for his people a testament to her teachings. But every night, the moon called to him, a silent, silver summons. It was her voice, her dream, and it had become his own. The longing was no longer a gentle ache. It was a constant, thrumming presence, a song only he could hear. One night, as a perfect, full moon bathed his kingdom in an ethereal glow, Alaric made a decision. The quiet weight of it settled in his bones, solid and sure. He would no longer be a king who simply dreamed. He would be the king who journeyed. The next morning, he summoned his two most trusted counselors to the Solarium Tower. Not to the throne room with its weight of ceremony, but to this place of dreams. The first to arrive was Alara, the royal sage. Her face was a beautiful map of wrinkles, each line telling a story of knowledge gained and wisdom earned. Her hair was a cloud of silver, and her eyes, the color of twilight, held a knowing calm. She had been Queen Lyra's closest friend and confidant. She entered the tower and simply nodded at Alaric, her gaze drifting to the great celestial globe in the center of the room, as if she already knew. The second was Finian, the royal artificer, a man whose lineage hailed from the mountain clans, though he himself was born and raised in the service of the crown. He was stout and strong, with a beard so black it seemed to drink the light, and hands that were calloused and clever, capable of crafting both the most delicate clockwork and the most formidable siege engine. He was a man of logic, of gears and levers, of things that could be measured and proven. He bowed deeply, his expression one of polite curiosity, though his eyes darted around the observatory, a place he considered to be filled with beautiful but impractical things. "My friends," Alaric began, his voice calm, yet resonating with the conviction he had found in the night. "For years, I have tended to the needs of Eldoria. I have ensured its peace and nurtured its growth. But I have neglected a duty of the heart. A promise made not in words, but in shared wonder. He gestured towards the charts on the wall, maps of the night sky his mother had drawn with painstaking love. My mother believed the moon was a world to be reached, not through conquest or ambition, but through wonder and a magic as old as the stars themselves. I intend to honor her belief. I intend to go there. Finian's bushy eyebrows shot up. He opened his mouth, then closed it, stroking his beard as if to make sure he had heard correctly. He looked at Alara, expecting a shared look of gentle concern for their king's sanity. But Alara was smiling, a soft, slow smile that seemed to dawn on her face like a sunrise. "It is time," she said, her voice a low hum. "The celestial alignments are favorable, as they have not been for 500 years. Lyra knew this time would come. She prepared the way." Finian finally found his voice. "Your Majesty Alara, with the greatest respect, the moon? It is well, it is in the sky. It is a light. We cannot simply sail to it. There is no water between here and there, only air. And then, nothing." "Not nothing, Master Finian," Alara corrected gently. "The ether, the sea of souls. It is not empty, but full. Full of currents, full of light, full of a substance that can be navigated as surely as any ocean, if one has the right vessel and the right map." Alaric looked at Alara, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. "She left us a map?" "More than a map, my king," Alara said. She walked to a heavy, oak bookshelf and pressed a sequence of carved stars. With a low groan of ancient mechanisms, the bookshelf swung inwards, revealing a hidden alcove, cool and smelling of dust and ozone. Within, resting on a velvet cushion, was an object that seemed to be forged from captured moonlight. It was a disk of polished silver, intricately etched with swirling patterns. As they watched, the patterns began to shift and glow with a soft, internal luminescence. "The astral chart," Alara breathed. "It does not show the way. It knows the way. It attunes itself to the heart of the seeker and the pull of the destination." Finian stepped closer, his skepticism warring with his craftsman's curiosity. He peered at the chart, his eyes tracing the impossible, moving lines of light. "Incredible," he muttered. "The artistry, it is not of man or dwarf. But even with a map, what vessel could withstand this ether?" "That, Master Finian," said Alaric, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time that day, "is where your genius is needed. Alara has the lore. I have the will. We need you to provide the means." Alara unrolled a long, brittle scroll of parchment on the central table. The drawings were elegant, ancient. They depicted a ship unlike any other. It was slender and graceful, like a swallow, with a high, curved prow and a single, elegant mast. It had no oars and no rudder in the traditional sense. "It is a celestial skiff," Alara explained. "It must be built not from common oak or pine, but from the wood of a star-touched tree. The sails must be woven from spun moonlight. And its heart, its engine must be a core of pure Etherium crystal, to resonate with the currents of the ether and propel the vessel forward." Finian stared at the schematics, his practical mind already dissecting the challenges. Spun moonlight, star-touched wood, Etherium crystals. This was the stuff of poets, not engineers. And yet the sheer, beautiful impossibility of it was a challenge his soul could not resist. It was the ultimate project. "The crystals," he said, his voice now laced with professional excitement. "They are spoken of in the old mountain lore. Deep, deep in the roots of the world, in the Dragon's Tooth Mountains. They say the caves hum with their power. It would be dangerous to mine them. They are volatile." "But possible?" Alaric pressed. Finian gave a grim nod. "For a steady hand and a shielded heart, yes. Possible." "And the wood?" Alaric asked, turning to Alara. "There is only one place such a tree grows," she said, her gaze distant. "The Grove of Whispering Light, deep within the oldest part of the forest. It is a sacred place, guarded. The wood cannot be taken. It must be given." "Then we shall ask," Alaric said simply. And so, The greatest and most secret enterprise of King Alaric's reign began. While the kingdom continued its peaceful existence, its king, its sage, and its artificer began their quest for the impossible. Their first journey was into the ancient forest, a place where the trees were so old their bark was like wrinkled skin, and their canopies formed a cathedral of green, filtering the sunlight into divine, dusty rays. They traveled for 3 days, guided by Alara's knowledge of the old ways, following paths unseen by normal eyes. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth, moss, and a strange electric hum that grew stronger as they approached the grove. They found it not behind a wall or a gate, but in a clearing where the light was different. It was softer, silver-hued, as if the moon had decided to rest there during the day. In the center of the clearing stood a single, colossal tree. Its bark was smooth and pearlescent, and its leaves were the color of pale silver, shimmering and rustling with a sound like faint, melodic chimes. This was the star-touched tree. As they stepped into the clearing, a figure detached itself from the shadows of the tree. She moved with a liquid grace that was neither human nor elf, but something older. She was tall and slender, with skin the color of polished birchwood and hair that flowed like a waterfall of dark moss. Her eyes were the color of amethysts. She held a longbow carved from the same pearlescent wood as the great tree. "This is a sacred place." Her voice was not loud, but it filled the clearing, resonating in their bones. "Why have you come, King of Men?" This was Seraphina, the guardian of the grove. Alara had spoken of her, a fey creature bound to the life of the ancient wood. Alaric stepped forward, his crown left behind in the castle, standing before her simply as a man. He did not speak of kingship or command. He spoke of his mother, the stargazer. He spoke of her dream, of the promise he felt in his heart. He described the moon not as a prize to be won, but as a place of wonder he wished to visit, to understand, to honor a memory. He held out his hands, showing they were empty of weapons, his heart open and his intention pure. Seraphina listened, her head tilted, her amethyst eyes searching his face, his soul. She could feel the truth of his words, the lack of greed or vanity in his quest. The song of his purpose, as she felt it, was a clear, pure note, not a jarring clang of ambition. When he finished, silence held the grove for a long moment. Then Seraphina lowered her bow. "A queen's love and a son's devotion," she said, her voice softening. "This is a worthy reason. The tree hears the truth of your heart. It will give what you need." She turned to the great tree and placed her palm against its shimmering bark. She began to sing. It was not a song of words, but of pure tones, a melody that seemed to weave the light of the clearing and the whispers of the leaves into a single, breathtaking harmony. In response, the star-touched tree began to glow from within. One of its lower branches, thick as a man's waist and perfectly straight, slowly detached itself from the trunk, not breaking or snapping, but separating as if it were a gift being offered. It floated down gently, landing on the soft moss at their feet without a sound, radiating a soft, cool light. "The keel of your vessel," Seraphina said. "It will remember the song of this grove and guide you through the darkest currents." She looked at Alaric. "Your journey is a bold one. You will need a navigator who understands the unseen flows. The ether is not unlike the life force of this forest, only vaster. When your ship is ready, I will join you." Alaric bowed his head, humbled by the gift and the offer. "We would be honored, guardian Seraphina." Their next journey took them in the opposite direction, from the vibrant life of the forest to the deep, silent stone of the Dragon's Tooth Mountains. The ascent was arduous, but Finian was in his element here. He read the rock as Alara read the stars, pointing out veins of iron and quartz, telling the mountain's history with every step. He led them to a fissure concealed behind a frozen waterfall, the entrance to the crystal caves. Inside, a breathtaking sight awaited them. The caves were not dark, but alive with a soft, pulsing blue light. Great crystals, some as large as men, grew from the floor and ceiling, their facets catching and refracting the glow until the entire cavern felt like the inside of a geode. The air hummed with a palpable energy, a low thrum that vibrated deep in their chests. "The Ethereum," Finian said in a hushed, reverent voice. He unpacked his tools. Padded tongs, velvet-lined boxes, and a tuning fork made of a strange, dark metal. "We must be careful. If one is harvested incorrectly, it can release its energy all at once. We need only a few, the ones that sing the purest note." While Alaric and Alara stood back, Finian went to work. He was no longer just a craftsman. He was a musician playing an orchestra of crystals. He would tap a crystal gently with his tuning fork and listen, his head cocked, his expression one of intense concentration. Most he passed by, but occasionally he would find one whose hum was a perfect, clear resonance. With surgical precision, he would use his tools to carefully pry the smaller, purer crystals from their larger formations, immediately wrapping them in enchanted cloth and placing them in the padded boxes. The work was slow, methodical, a masterclass in patience and skill. He gathered 5 perfect crystals, each the size of a man's heart, their blue light pulsing in a steady, rhythmic beat. They returned to the castle with their impossible treasures, the glowing branch of a star-touched tree and a box of humming, captive starlight. In a disused, high-walled courtyard, hidden from any prying eyes, the construction of the stargazer's wish began. The weeks that followed were a blur of magical artisanship. Finian, with a reverence he had never before shown for his materials, began to shape the lumine wood. The wood did not splinter or chip, but yielded to his tools as if it were a dense, firm clay, allowing him to carve the elegant, flowing lines from the ancient schematics. He built the central housing for the Ethereum crystals, a complex lattice of silver and copper designed to channel their energy. Alara spent her days at a great loom, but she did not use thread of wool or silk. She worked only at night, under the light of the moon, her hands moving in intricate patterns as she gathered the silvery beams, weaving them into a fabric that was impossibly light and yet stronger than steel. These would be their sails, designed to catch not wind, but the solar winds and the currents of the ether. Seraphina, true to her word, arrived as the hull took shape. She brought with her saps and pollens from the grove, which she worked into the seams of the ship, sealing it not just against the void, but with the life force of her home. She moved around the construction site with a quiet grace, her presence a calming influence on the humming energy of the crystals and the restless anticipation of the king. And Alaric was not idle. He was not a king observing his subjects. He was a part of the crew. He learned from Finian how to sand the strange, smooth wood until it shone with its own inner light. He sat with Alara and learned to trace the protective runes she inscribed along the ship's keel, symbols of warding, guidance, and safe passage. He spent hours with Seraphina, learning to read the subtle shifts in the wind and light, the precursors to understanding the ether. Finally, after 2 full cycles of the moon, it was finished. The stargazer's wish rested in the center of the courtyard, a thing of impossible beauty. Its hull of pearlescent lumine wood seemed to absorb the starlight and glow from within. Its single mast stood tall and proud, and the moonlight-woven sail, currently furled, shimmered like a captured aurora. It was more than a ship. It was a prayer made manifest, a dream given form. That night, the 4 of them stood before it, bathed in the light of a crescent moon. The kingdom of Eldoria slept peacefully around them, unaware of the miracle hidden in their midst. The air was still, filled with a sense of profound and imminent departure. Alaric placed a hand on the cool, smooth hull of the ship. He could feel a faint vibration, a readiness. It was the hum of the Ethereum crystals, the memory of the grove's song, and the echo of his own yearning heart, all singing the same tune. The journey was about to begin. The departure was not marked by fanfare or cheering crowds, but by the profound silence of a starlit night. Under the watchful gaze of a slender, silver crescent moon, the 4 companions made their final preparations. Alara, her face serene in the dim light, walked a slow circle around the stargazer's wish, murmuring a final blessing in an ancient tongue, her words seeming to hang in the air like motes of glistening dust. Finian performed a last-minute check of the Ethereum core, his brow furrowed in concentration as he listened to the steady, rhythmic hum of the crystals, a sound like the heartbeat of a sleeping titan. Seraphina stood at the prow, her eyes closed, her senses extending outwards, feeling the subtle tides of the atmosphere, searching for the clearest path upwards. King Alaric stood for a moment, looking back at the sleeping towers of his castle. He felt a pang of poignant sadness, the quiet ache of leaving a home he loved, a people he was sworn to protect. He had left a letter for his trusted steward, explaining his pilgrimage to the northern mountains and granting him regency, a necessary deception to prevent panic. This journey was for his soul, but his heart remained with Eldoria. Taking a deep, steadying breath, he turned away from the past and towards the future, and climbed aboard the vessel. "It is time," he said, his voice steady. Finian nodded and retreated to the small, sheltered area at the stern that housed the ship's engine. With a delicate touch, he adjusted a series of silver levers, gently coaxing the Ethereum crystals from their slumber into a state of active resonance. The low hum intensified, rising in pitch to a clear, harmonic chime that vibrated through the very wood of the ship. The protective runes Alara had carved along the keel began to glow with a soft, azure light. "The currents are favorable," Seraphina called from the prow, her hand resting on a smooth, tiller-like column of lumine wood that rose from the deck. "The Sky River flows gently tonight." Alaric gave the final command. "Take us up." There was no roar of fire, no violent shudder. Instead, a profound sense of lightness filled them. The gravitational pull of the earth simply ceased to apply. As smoothly as a milkweed seed lifted by a summer breeze, the stargazer's wish rose from the stone courtyard. It ascended without a sound, a phantom of pearlescent wood and shimmering light climbing the night sky. Alaric gripped the railing, his knuckles white, and looked down. The castle, his home, shrank below them, becoming a beautifully intricate toy. Then the city, its few remaining lights like scattered embers. Then the dark patch of the forest and the silver ribbons of the rivers. Soon, the whole of Eldoria was a patchwork of deep greens and blues, nestled in the curve of the world, veiled in a thin blanket of clouds. The sight was so beautiful, so heart-achingly magnificent, that it stole the breath from his lungs. He was leaving his world behind to touch another. They passed through the upper veils of the atmosphere, and the air grew thin and cold. But within the ship's glowing runes, a bubble of warmth and breathable air remained. A small pocket of Eldoria's magic carried with them into the void. Then they breached the final layer. The blue of the sky fell away, replaced by a blackness so absolute, so profound, it was like looking into the very fabric of infinity. And the stars, oh, the stars. They were not the gentle, distant twinkles of his observatory. Here, they were fierce, blazing diamonds of silver, gold, and sapphire, strewn across the velvet dark in breathtaking profusion. They did not twinkle. They burned with a steady, silent fire. "We are in the ether," Alara said, her voice filled with a quiet awe. The sea of ether. It was not an empty vacuum as Finian had feared. The space between worlds was alive. It was a vast, silent ocean, but instead of water, it was composed of a subtle, shimmering substance that flowed in invisible currents. Seraphina at the helm could feel them. She navigated not by sight alone, but by a deeper instinct, her hands guiding the ship along the flowing tides of cosmic energy. The moonlight-spun sail was unfurled, and it billowed out, catching the faint but persistent pressure of the solar wind, a stream of particles from the distant sun that glittered like golden dust. Their journey settled into a slow, majestic rhythm. Days and nights lost their meaning in the timeless void, marked only by the shifting starscapes. They sailed through phenomena that would have shattered the minds of earthly philosophers. They passed through a nebula, a vast, swirling cloud of incandescent gas, and it was like sailing through the heart of a rainbow. Hues of magenta, turquoise, and deep violet swirled around the ship, the light so thick it felt like moving through liquid silk. Tiny, newborn stars, no bigger than Alaric's fist, pulsed with gentle light like cosmic fireflies, bumping harmlessly against the ship's protective field before drifting away. Finian, the man of logic, was humbled. He spent hours simply staring into the abyss, his skepticism replaced by a profound, childlike wonder. He took meticulous notes, sketching the star shoal's great, shimmering schools of lightforms that moved with a collective intelligence, parting around their vessel like fish in a stream. He tried to measure the ether's density, to understand the physics of their propulsion, but his instruments gave nonsensical readings. He eventually put his tools away and simply learned to appreciate the majesty of what he could not explain. Yet, the sea of ether was not without its perils. One period, as they traversed a particularly dark patch of space, Seraphina's brow furrowed. "A storm is coming," she warned. "An etheric squall." There was no wind, no rain. The storm manifested as a turbulence in the very fabric of space. The gentle currents they had been riding became a chaotic maelstrom. The ship began to buck and pitch, not from wind, but from warping space. Outside, the stars seemed to streak and bend. "The core is fluctuating," Finian yelled from the stern, his hands braced against the crystal housing. "The chaotic energy is interfering with the resonance. Reinforce the runes," Alaric commanded, his voice calm and steady, a captain in his element. Alara moved swiftly, her hands tracing the glowing symbols on the inner hull, her chanting a low, steady counter-rhythm to the chaos outside. The azure light of the runes brightened, holding firm against the encroaching darkness. Seraphina fought the helm, her knuckles white, but her face a mask of serene focus. She was not fighting the storm, but dancing with it, using its own wild energy to divert them, finding the path of least resistance through the tempest. Alaric joined her, his hand resting next to hers on the tiller, lending his strength and his unshakable will to hers. They worked as one, king and guardian, their shared purpose a beacon in the storm. For what felt like an eternity, they were tossed in the silent, violent squall. Then, as suddenly as it began, they sailed out of it, back into a calm current. The ship was unharmed. A collective sigh of relief went through the small crew. They had faced the raw, untamed power of the cosmos and endured. The shared trial had forged them into something more than a king and his companions. They were a crew, bound by starlight and survival. After the storm, they were greeted by a sight of profound peace. They drifted past a celestial, a creature of myth spoken of in Alara's oldest texts. It was a vast being, larger than any mountain, that resembled a whale made of starlight and nebulae. It swam slowly through the ether, its long, mournful song echoing not in their ears, but directly in their minds, a song of creation, of loneliness, and of immense, ancient peace. They watched it pass in reverent silence, feeling infinitesimally small and yet part of something immeasurably vast. As they drew nearer to their destination, the moon began to dominate their view. It grew from a silver coin to a shining shield, and finally to a world. It was not the gray, pockmarked orb of scientific observation. This was Queen Lyra's moon, Selene's lantern. Its surface glowed with a soft, internal luminescence. The great, dark patches they called seas from Eldoria were not empty plains, but vast, smooth fields of a dark, crystalline substance that seemed to absorb the starlight. The craters were not scars of impact, but perfect, shimmering bowls, and from the center of many tall, slender spires of crystal grew towards the sky. And over it all, hanging in the blackness like a breathtaking celestial jewel, was their home, the world. A swirling marble of brilliant blue, verdant green, and pristine white. Seeing it from this perspective, so beautiful and fragile in the infinite dark, brought tears to Alaric's eyes. His love for his kingdom expanded into a love for his entire world. Seraphina guided the stargazer's wish into a gentle, descending spiral. They were aiming for a large, smooth plain that glowed with a particularly soft, inviting light, a place that on earthly maps was named the Sea of Tranquility. The name they were about to discover was exquisitely literal. With the same gentle grace with which they had departed, the ship touched down. There was no jolt, only a soft crunch, like walking on fresh snow. The humming of the Ethereum drive ceased, plunging them into a silence that was absolute and profound. For a moment no one moved. They had arrived. They were on the moon. Alaric was the first to his feet. With a trembling hand, he lowered the short ramp from the side of the ship. The air that greeted them was thin and cool, but breathable, tasting of ozone and clean stone, with a faint, sweet scent like night-blooming flowers. He took the first step, and his boot sank gently into the ground. It was a surface of fine, silvery dust that seemed to sparkle with its own light. With every step, a soft, low musical chime would sound, rising from the dust itself. They had landed on a plain that sang. The sky above was a perfect, star-dusted black velvet. There was no atmosphere to dim the light of the cosmos, and the sheer number and brilliance of the stars was overwhelming. And dominant in that sky was the Earth, a vibrant, living jewel that cast a soft blue-green light on the lunar landscape, a phenomenon they would later call Earthlight. They explored their immediate surroundings in a state of dreamlike wonder. Nearby grew a forest, but not of wood. The trees were tall, slender crystals that branched out into intricate, fractal patterns. As the Earthlight struck them, they chimed with a delicate, ever-changing melody, a symphony of light and sound. Finian, ever the scientist, knelt and examined the soil, finding it to be a silicate compound rich in glowing phosphors. Alara simply stood, a blissful smile on her face, breathing in the pure magic of the place. But Alaric felt a pull. It was a gentle, insistent tug on his heart, similar to the one that had drawn him to the moon in the first place, but more specific. It was a call from the heart of this world. Leaving the others to their own discoveries, he began to walk, following the silent summons across the singing plain, towards a large, distant crater. The journey was effortless. The moon's gravity was a gentle, buoyant force, making each step feel like a small, graceful leap. He walked for what felt like an hour, the landscape shimmering around him, until he reached the rim of the great crater. He looked down and his breath caught in his throat. The crater was not empty. It was filled with a garden. Not a garden of green, earthly plants, but a flora made from pure, soft light. There were flowers whose petals were solidified beams of starlight, bushes that shimmered with the colors of the aurora, and weeping willows whose drooping branches were cascades of liquid moonlight. The air here was warmer, saturated with peace. This was the place his mother had spoken of, where dreams were as real as stones. This was the Garden of Selene. He walked down a gentle slope into the heart of the garden. He realized the flowers were not just light, they were memories. As he passed a cluster of softly pulsing blue blossoms, he felt a wave of pure joy, the memory of a child's laughter, not his own, but a universal echo. A deep red rose-like bloom radiated a feeling of passionate, eternal love. This garden was a repository for the dreams and deepest emotions of the world that shone so brightly in its sky. He was drawn to the very center of the garden, where a single flower grew. It was different from the others. Its petals were the color of a silver moonbeam, and it pulsed with a gentle, familiar light. As he drew near, he smelled the faint scent of old parchment and beeswax candles. He knew with absolute certainty what this was. Reaching out with a hand that shook slightly, he gently touched one of the luminous petals. Instantly, he was no longer in the crater. He was a small boy again, wrapped in a warm blanket, sitting in the solarium tower. His mother, Queen Lyra, was beside him, her arm around his shoulders. Her voice, clear as a silver bell, filled his ears. "Look, my little starling," she was saying, pointing a graceful finger at the full moon. "It waits for us. It is not an ending, but a beginning. A place of peace. Never forget to look up, Alaric. Never stop dreaming." He felt the warmth of her embrace, saw the love in her eyes, felt the unshakable certainty of her belief. It was not a memory revisited. It was a moment relived. A tear slid down Alaric's cheek, not of sorrow, but of profound, overwhelming peace. The restless longing in his heart, the ache he had carried for so many years, simply dissolved, replaced by a quiet, shining joy. He had not come here to conquer a world. He had come here to find a memory, to say a final, beautiful goodbye, and to understand that his mother's love had been with him all along. He had fulfilled the stargazer's wish. He stayed there for a long time, bathed in the light of the memory flower. When he finally stood, he felt lighter, more whole than he had in his entire life. He carefully picked a single, fallen petal from the base of the flower. It felt cool and smooth in his hand, a solid piece of moonlight, and placed it in a small pouch. He also found a small, smooth moonstone, humming with the same gentle chime as the plane, and took it as a memento. His companions found him there as the earth began to set below the crater's rim, painting the landscape in shades of sapphire and gold. They saw the change in him. The king who had left Eldoria was burdened by a dream. The king who stood before them now was illuminated by it. Their return journey was quiet, a peaceful reflection on all they had seen. The sea of ether seemed to welcome them, its currents carrying them gently home. As the stargazer's wish descended once more into the courtyard from which it had departed, the first light of dawn was breaking over the towers of Eldoria. In the nights that followed, King Alaric still climbed the steps to the solarium tower. He still looked at the moon, but the restless longing was gone. In its place was a deep, quiet affection, the fondness one feels for a cherished and familiar friend. On his great oak desk, the small gray moonstone sat, humming its soft, otherworldly tune, a constant reminder that the greatest journeys are not those that conquer new lands, but those that heal the landscapes of the heart. The kingdom of Eldoria had its wise and gentle king back, but he was a king transformed, a ruler who had walked on the silver shores of a dream and returned with a soul full of starlight. And under the ever-watchful gaze of Celine's lantern, the kingdom and its king slept in profound and lasting peace.